just to drop in to your heart, you mentioned that you came from listening to children sing about Earth. Like, how perfect is that?
It was pretty perfect.
Mhm.
It's so amazing to have like so many weather events on the celebration of Earth Day.
Yeah.
To have such a brilliant snowstorm in the
Mhm.
middle of what has been 80-degree weather
I
because we
know.
live in this gorgeous place.
I know.
But hearing these children like do poems about Earth Day, and like one in particular
Mhm.
was sort of speaking like, I am water, I am
Mm.
like the cosmos, I am. And like he finished with like, from my family, and it totally plucked the heartstrings. And
Mm.
to me, I do the work that I do to support every generation
Mhm.
because I have a daughter. I want to make sure she lives the most thriving, incredible life.
Yeah.
But I'm watching everyone's health decline, and as everyone's health decline, the seas lower in my mind, right?
Yeah.
So just wanting to like honor the generation that's coming, but recognize that their well-being is based on my well-being, is based on my parents' well-being, because we are the educators and we're the stewards until they're ready to take that over.
Totally. I mean, that resonates so much. The invocation and the statement of trying to become a worthy ancestor, just to operate from that place. The declaration that um, this matters to me, that perspective, the long now, the future, and also the grief of we're actually going in the wrong direction, guys.
We've lost a lot of
We've
wisdom.
lost a lot of the depth of um, connection that, talk about this a lot. I don't think we necessarily want to go backwards, but it is very important to revive what has been lost and bring it forward into the now. Um, Kind of that archaic revival. And, you know, the topic of much of what you and I have been talking about since we met is reconnecting to those disconnections. It's not that we're actually disconnected from our bodies and from our selfhood and from one another and from nature. We can't be, but we operate as though we are. And that has led to so much suffering. And it's an ongoing thing that you and I are like so vividly aware of. And, on the topic of reconnecting to the body, we've identified these 5 fundamental pillars. And the first is water. So, should we kick off our chat on water?
I would love that. Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, we both agreed that the people that don't think that you can have a toast with pure water are misguided.
I think we should just start a new trend.
We're starting a new trend right here on this podcast. So, welcome everyone. My name is Dave Tusek. I'm the founder of Cloud Medical, and our goal there is to help usher in the primary care renaissance. And we're doing that to be in service of, for all of our patients and really all people, this concept of health sovereignty, of reclaiming the power of our own over our own health and the freedom of our own health, which also we've gotten a little bit disconnected from. And I'm here today with Katie Armstrong, and it's just an honor and a pleasure to be with you here today. And I'm sure it's going to be the first of many conversations.
I'm very excited, and I'm excited about our topic because even with my clients as a health coach, I always focus on water first.
Mhm.
It's a simple change that people can make in their lives, and it's really foundational to their well-being. But even just having the win of succeeding at a singular change can lay the foundation for
Mhm.
so many more transformations.
Mhm.
So I think it's lovely that both our philosophies start with water.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. So just a quick contextual orientation, kind of to find ourselves. Where are we? We're going to be talking about the first reconnection, which is to our body. And there are really several fundamental pillars or paths that we have to identify as elemental to that journey of reconnection to our body. And they map over what we call the 5 pillars of health, which are hydration, nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress reduction. And hydration is obviously how we use fluids to optimize our well-being, and the many ways of doing that. There's so many things to talk about, but we really want people to be able to leave this podcast with some like very clear, practical information about something that they can use immediately and implement into their lives right away on a pragmatic level on this topic of the first pillar of health. And to do it from the perspective of a physician, myself, as well as a health coach, Katie. And we really, the both of us, believe that both of those perspectives are the way to help our mutual patients and clients and members optimize around all of these pillars to bring the knowledge and the practical implementation, as well as all of the things that you do so beautifully in your work, which is to help people actually implement these in a, you know, in a way that's durable in their lives.
I'm really excited for these conversations between doctor and coach because they set up the ideal protocols
Mm-hmm.
and then offer an opportunity to have conversation around what that actually looks like to implement.
Yeah, yeah. So water, just to dive in, each of our 5 pillars of health have 5 components. And so we're going to go deep into each of those 5 components. The first one is, where does water come from? Or at least, where does the water come from that I want to drink or that I should be drinking if my goal is optimal health and well-being? And so we can just dive in there.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the first thing that I would say is 2023, I believe it was the late Q4 of 2023, the United States Geological Survey did a study that they published on tap water across the United States. And what they found was just shocking and astonishing and tragic, which is that more than half of all tap water in the United States is contaminated with PFAS chemicals. These are the forever chemicals, and the chemicals that do not ever degrade naturally, and that have been linked to all kinds of health problems. And that doesn't include microplastics and all of the endocrine disrupting agents that we've all heard about in the news, the BPAs and all of those things. These are just, they just looked at PFAS chemicals, right? We also know that the contamination of our bodies, the contamination of our food, the contamination of rain and breast milk, right? They have detected things like glyphosate and microplastics basically on every corner of our planet. Even in Antarctica, when they do ice core samples, they can now identify microplastics. So the first thing to say about water is, how do we even get healthy, clean water? And I think there's so much confusion around that. So let's sort of unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I moved to Boulder, Colorado, for college, and my freshman year, I was studying environmental studies as part of an architecture major, and it was the first introduction I had to this concept of global environmentalism and global environmental issues. And the first semester, it was a class that walked through every major environmental issue and how it was essentially wind moving across the entire planet, water moving across the entire planet, chemicals moving across the entire planet, and how every choice we made, from the water we drank to the food we ate to how we got rid of trash, had an impact on the health of the planet, but also the health of the individuals and animals living on that planet. That opened my eyes to an entirely different world. And all of a sudden, I started seeing how the choices that I was making were going to have long term implications for my own well being, but also potentially in like the way that they would impact society, have implications for my children, my grandchildren, and for
Yeah.
7, 8 generations to come. I'm so grateful for that education and for living in a place like Boulder that is so focused on two things: optimal health and optimal performance. It is one of the highest per capita of athletes,
Mm-hmm.
but also environmentalism. And to be living in a place that shows that correlation has allowed me to make choices for myself and for like future generations, but also to educate people who don't live here and to open their eyes that maybe their health issues are almost, I want to say, not quite their fault.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that bringing agency to your choices requires also bringing education to an understanding about the choices that are being made for you. Because right now we're living in a society where the default choices are going to make you ill.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to really be specific about things like what you're eating and drinking and even breathing to assure that you are protecting yourself. So,
Yeah. I often think about the escape velocity of the gravitational field of our culture, like how hard it is to actually eject yourself from the comfort and convenience and consumerism as opposed to conscious stewardship and living in coherence with nature. And, and as we go through the four disconnections, the four quadrants, reconnecting to nature, that's really the focus. And it'll be wonderful to explore that together in depth. I think today, just talking again about the pragmatic ways in which, all right, how do I even begin to step into a relationship with water and hydration that comes from a non-toxic source? And is there even such a thing? You know, um,
I suppose the good news is the body can handle a certain level of toxicity. So we're
yeah,
just trying to assure that it's got as light a load as possible
yeah,
and that it's not accumulating over time
yeah,
by conscious choices each and every day.
totally, totally. And it's, quickly to say that many of these unseen things are cumulative impacts that are the answers to so many of the unknown questions, to so many of the mysteries. Why is cancer happening earlier and earlier and earlier? Why has autoimmunity increased 30x since 1980? Why has autism increased 30,000 fold since, the same amount of time? Or some, it's just unfathomable what we're looking at in terms of the ramp and the slope of how quickly many of these things are deteriorating um, in our little tiny lifetime, like in the few decades that we've been around. And so, yeah, like what would be the simplest, most strategic way to say, I'm gonna do my very, very best to limit the negative inputs and then to also optimize the outputs. So helping with detoxification when necessary. I think about how fortunate we are again for so many reasons. As a guy who's lived in 8 different countries, I've never felt more at home than Boulder County. I feel so blessed every day to live here. And one of the reasons is we're so fortunate that unlike many communities, um, we actually don't have to drink the tap water. Many communities have really three choices: tap water, regular bottled water that you get at a grocery store, and filtration systems. And for, I think, reasons that are super important to talk through, we have the greatest privilege of all, which is we live above a 9,000 foot deep aquifer that spouts out some of the highest quality water in the world, about 10 miles from here in El Dorado. Um, and El Dorado Springs, which is about as clean as you can get and about as live as you can get. So, living water as opposed to water that's been pummeled to death by chemicals and processing and the municipal treatment of water that flows out of your tap, is very, very different in quality than natural spring water, particularly upstream spring water, that again we're so blessed to have. And when I first moved here in 2004, El Dorado Springs didn't do the thing that I was really hoping and waiting for them to do, and they recently started doing that, which is we're not just going to offer delivery of this to your house in plastic jugs. We're going to offer it in glass jugs. So I'm so grateful, and I really recommend to all of our patients and members at Cloud to be like, look, if you can, it's not that expensive, and they will literally deliver as much as you want. They will provide you with a dispenser that's made out of ceramic, so there's no plastic involved at all. And the water comes straight from the spring into a glass jug and on your kitchen counter, um, again for a really affordable price. And yeah, we can talk about the difference between such a gift and such a blessing and those three other alternatives that, are also options and are often the only options for people that don't live near a place like El Dorado Springs.
Well, just to bring your detail to life a little bit, I remember the first time that I tried living water.
Mm-hmm.
It actually wasn't here in Colorado, it was out in California, but I just remembered feeling like hydrated for the first
Mm-hmm.
time, and even like a certain like sparkly
Yeah.
vibration, for, lack of a better way of describing it. It just, I felt more rejuvenated. I felt more refreshed. And I dealt with an autoimmune condition about 10 years ago. And at the time, I had an incredible filtration system on my house, but I wasn't drinking living water. And it was a recommendation to me. And that's when I started ordering El Dorado water,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm so grateful for. And it was a big part of my healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
just found that I didn't get sick as frequently, that my digestion improved, like these unknown correlations, if you will, like felt very connected to me, to this water source. And especially when I was pregnant, I really couldn't even tolerate filtered water. It felt like I would notice my lymph glands would swell
Mm-hmm.
up. Versus if I was drinking this living water, it felt effective at its core purpose,
Yeah,
hydration. So
totally.
I think, if, like you said, not everyone has the luxury of
Mm-hmm.
having this water at least all the time. But I think that if people can at least look into whether there's sources near them, a lot of people don't realize that they might live right down the street from
Mm-hmm.
a open source,
Mm-hmm.
and that this living water is a real gift.
Yeah,
It can be a key component in healing, but also maintaining health.
totally. And so, what is in living water that's missing from dead water? Well, I mean, lots of things. Really, two main categories. One are the essential minerals that we have, that it's fascinating when you get into the concept. In Europe, there's a whole field, it's called balneology, which is basically the study of, different spa therapies. When you go to places like Germany, many of the towns end in the word Bad. So, or in Central Europe in general, Marienbad, Karlsbad, Baden, those mean baths, right? So it's similar to like all the towns in the US that end with springs, Steamboat Springs, and so on and so forth, Colorado Springs. These are all places that had these natural springs. And what's fascinating is they all have a very different fingerprint of the specific minerals that are contained in them. And all of those have specific healing properties that are very, very different. And again, all over Europe, people used to go to these spa towns for various ailments. Some were good for autoimmune conditions, others were good for orthopedic problems, others were good for neurologic problems, and so on and so forth. And so the healing properties vary, but they are, all sort of linked with the fact that minerals like calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, essential things that our bodies can't live without, are plentiful in these mineral waters. Also, there are micronutrients, trace minerals, the fulvic minerals, um, things that we need of much, much lower amounts, but are still important for our bodies to optimize, to function optimally, are also present in this water that basically springs forth from the earth. And when we run it through the processing in the municipalities, or even through various osmotic filters, some of those healthy or salutogenic minerals, micronutrient, and trace elements can get stripped out. And never mind the fact that they're oftentimes toxified with things that, in certain levels, right, in cumulative amounts, so in teeny tiny amounts, they don't do much, but even chlorine and fluoride are quite toxic to the body in increasing amounts. And if people are exposed to them continually, they can certainly lead to health problems that manifest fairly overtly, right? And so we're looking at both what is in the water from the perspective that shouldn't be there, too much of something bad, toxicities, as well as something good that isn't there, deficiencies. And living water is the, the ultimate, sort of best of both worlds.
When you're speaking, what I'm thinking of is ecosystems.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of different types of ecosystem, rainforest, savanna, and there's a certain level of balance that occurs. And what I'm envisioning as you're speaking is these living bodies of water have found their balance between all these different micronutrients or trace minerals. And we are sort of creating almost like a monocrop
Mm-hmm.
of water by stripping things or adding things just sort of in these like gross doses.
Mm-hmm.
And as a swimmer, I grew up being a swimmer.
Yeah.
I completely relate to the toxicity of overexposure to chlorine in particular. In fact, I would love to be swimming more, but unless I have access to a saline swimming pool, I notice I start to have a decreased immune response if I'm in chlorine too frequently. And I've seen um, studies that show that swimmers, specifically women's collegiate swimmers, have a much higher rate of bladder cancer. And I dealt with bladder conditions. And I think back to the 20 plus hours I would spend in a chlorinated pool each week. And I have to ask myself, was this affecting my microbiome? Like, what all was this doing to my body?
Yeah.
And so, whether it's exposure on the inside from drinking water, or whether it's on the outside from being soaked in water, it's either adding value or it's taking away the innate values of nature,
Mm-hmm.
including us. We are nature.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's so true. And so to kind of wrap this first of the five pillars, or the five components of the first pillar, um, you know, people who have the ability to use and and um, increase their intake of natural spring water as opposed to water that either has been toxified or stripped of those elements. I think that's a very, very important foundational pillar of moving towards optimal well-being, thriving, flourishing, which is what we want for ourselves, our families, and the people that we care for.
So, for individuals that don't have access to that high quality living water, what's the next best option?
Yeah. So that takes us sort of to the next thing, which is, how do I resurrect or reanimate water that has been stripped of some of those wonderful things? And a couple ways of doing that. So let's just say that you live in a place where the best thing you can do is get a reverse osmosis filtration system, which is fantastic. Gets rid of many of those impurities. We can reanimate that water with electrolytes, and then probably the best way to do it is using fulvic minerals. So fulvic minerals are things that come in a little tiny dropper, and you can put 1 or 2 drops into a glass of water. You can immediately feel the thing that you were describing at the beginning, which is I just feel more hydrated. I feel more nourished from that perspective of my fluid balance. Um, and it's got a slightly earthy kind of taste to it. There are many brands out there. My favorite is our local Boulder brand, Akamai Basics, makes wonderful fulvic minerals. Um, and then combine that with some addition of electrolytes. Oftentimes, I will add electrolytes even to our El Dorado Springs water. I start the day always with a full glass of water with, I usually use element salts. I find that they're great. And I feel that not just for me, but so many of our cloud members who have had issues with, I feel tired. I feel dizzy. I feel woozy. I don't have a high sense of vitality, energy. My life force seems to kind of be weakened. I've been going through adrenal problems and adrenal fatigue. I've been under a lot of stress. All of these kinds of sort of ailments and syndromes benefit greatly from a, a very, very kind of disciplined approach to hydrating yourself first thing in the morning and, you know, replacing one of the things that we're going to talk about, all the mythologies of our time. And one of the great mythologies of our time is that salt is bad for you. There are obviously people who are salt sensitive, who have all kinds of comorbidities and health issues, problems with high blood pressure and all that have to be careful about salt. But in general, particularly people that are active and trying to lead healthy lifestyles, we're salt depleted. We don't have enough salt. So replacing it almost universally helps people feel better from all of those things that I mentioned.
We did a couple things there in your recommendation to have people like essentially beef up their first sip in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
One, you establish that hydration comes first.
Mm-hmm.
Simple win first thing in the morning, but one a lot of people skip. Maybe they're in a rush to get their kids ready for school. Maybe they need to hurry up and eat breakfast or grab a protein bar. They don't even think to have water, let alone a fortified water. But in my experience, if you can get somebody having a nice established morning routine and do some habit stacking, which is where you take like one habit that is easy for you to do, like having a glass of water, and pair it with 4, 5, 6 different other activities that are going to add value to your life as a whole. You start off the day with your best foot forward, and it can allow you to make better choices throughout the rest of the day and even just feel like you're choosing your life. A certain level of agency in your own life will allow you to kind of build your masterpiece, which I consider your life to be your greatest masterpiece. So I really like that. And that's actually how I start with most of my clients as well. And I even like to get them to think about starting it the night before. So putting a glass of water by their bed is a really great way to even just remind them that they should be having that drink of water as their first established habit. And, you know, in this case, putting the fulvic minerals next to that water so they remember to put it inside, but allowing people to kind of really finish their day and start their day in a way that allows that bookend of choice and optimal performance.
Yeah, no, I love the habit stacking. And I find that oftentimes doing so, it's a synergy. So that 1 + 1 + 1 = 7. And they basically amplify one another when you coordinate them in a smart way. And, you know, the whole point of all of this is to help people find ways without taking too much extra time,
Yeah.
spending too much extra money, or doing things that are really complicated, like really fundamental, rudimentary, easy things to
Yeah.
incorporate into their lives that totally move the needle in a felt way, in a perceptible way, on their overall well-being, thriving, and flourishing. So I love that you added that in there.
Yeah, I mean, the hardest part of this is purchasing the product and doing it the first time.
Yep.
But once you've done this once, the momentum is going. If you can do this 6, 7, 8 times and
Yep.
it becomes habitual, it becomes an accident. And at that point, it's no longer taking up brain capacity and it's purely a win. So if this is something that you're interested in, I'd encourage you to actually make this first step. Hop on, the internet or go to your local store and actually look up fulvic minerals and purchase one of these products and make the goal of starting it tomorrow or the day after you actually receive this product, because no better time than the now.
And here on the Front Range of Colorado, Eldorado Springs in glass, Element or a similar electrolyte powder that doesn't have a lot of sugar and additional carbs that you don't need in the morning, and fulvic minerals. What a perfect combination.
And just to be clear here, so I want to make sure I understand. So like my personal protocol is I have like a trace mineral first thing in the morning. And I tend to do electrolytes throughout the day or during workouts or even at night. It sounds like you recommend electrolytes first thing in the morning. Can you speak to if that's just something you prefer, or whether you think that's something everyone should be doing?
Maybe not everyone, but I certainly would encourage everyone try it, because most of the time, I mean, in the vast, vast majority of cases, people are like, I just feel way, way better. I think if we look at some of these electrolytes, right? Magnesium and potassium in particular, but sodium and calcium as well. These are some of the most common deficiencies across the board, right? So most of us, the foods that we're eating, due to some of the soil depletion that we've obviously experienced, don't have the nutrients that they used to. And no matter what we're doing to eat, the cleanest, the most organic and free range and grass fed and so on and so forth, oftentimes we still need supplementation. Some of the key elements and most important things to keep in mind that are common, almost universal, particularly if you're already somebody that, we hope incorporates all 5 pillars. So hydration, nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress reduction. The third pillar of exercise, where we're sweating a lot or we're doing sauna therapies. I mean, we're just pouring these salts out of our bodies and we have to replenish them. And even if you're not somebody that exercises a ton, oftentimes we find so many health benefits attributable to these salts. And we can get into the difference between different kinds of magnesium. Citrate, glycinate, malate, threonate, they all have kind of slightly different benefits or cascades of effects. But something like Element has a really nice balance of kind of most universally beneficial form of magnesium, as well as sodium and potassium.
And not intended purely as a plug for Element, but their chocolate salt warm is such a nice treat
It's
in the
great.
evening.
I find it hard to mix though. Sometimes it floats to the top.
I'm very dairy tolerant, so a little bit of milk in there makes it like a hot chocolate, and it's a perfect way to end the day for me.
Right on. And to your point, I think there's Boulder salt. I think that's another great brand. Noon makes some low sugar variations, and the second pillar of health is nutrition, and we'll unpack that later. But that has a lot to do with things like fasting practices. And so I don't really like to break my fast in the morning with water, first thing in the morning with water that has any calories. And so that's why this combination of Eldorado, Element, and fulvic minerals is such a good one. So that kind of rounds out very, I think, easy, practical, usable, easily implementable, to your point, like where's the friction taking that first step, and there's really only 3 websites that you need from that. And again, I have absolutely no financial gain from this. I have no affiliation with either of these companies, and there are many others in that realm, but I just creature of habit and have found these to be great for me and my body, and many of our patients love them too.
Sounds like we have a great start to your day and a solid recommendation.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because what I find with clients is that even if they can get going at the beginning of the day with the right practices, it's difficult to keep the habit going throughout the day. So I don't know about you, but one of my early requests of a new client is, what are you drinking out of
Yeah.
during the day? What kind of water bottle do you have?
Yeah, if you're going to get it delivered into glass, what happens after that, right?
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
Well, for me, I like to encourage people to celebrate their positive habits.
Mhm.
So, it's either going and like finding an old friend water bottle in the cupboard that they've been ignoring and then checking if it meets like my criteria for best practices. And if not, investing in themselves. And so I really like to see people drinking out of glass, ideally, or stainless steel, but certainly not plastic. Even some of the plastics that are like, quote, BPA free are insufficient on my end, because those were considered the best practice 20 years ago, and we found this to be a huge problem. So what I'm wanting to see is as far away from anything that could possibly break down in the process of using it for a long period of time. Because again, we want these to be in somebody's hand all day, every day, possibly on their bike in the heat. What can we use that's going to be only supporting their health and not possibly harming it? So I'm wondering, do you share that same philosophy?
I recently did a deep dive on what does BPA free mean.
It's terrifying.
It turns out that all of the BPA alternatives are just as bad as BPA. In some cases, probably worse.
In some cases, probably worse, just
Yeah.
not regulated currently.
Correct. And so I totally agree with you. I think that there's a potentiation, a catalyzation of the toxicity through heat exposure. So you can take something that's bad and make it way worse. For instance, make it leach more directly into the water that you're drinking by heating it. I think all of the things that are not glass, ceramic, wood, or stainless steel or aluminum are really, really problematic. I think styrofoam is really problematic. I think um, coffee cups in Starbucks that are all lined, they're paper, but they're lined with all kinds of um, plastic layers that are sprayed onto that paper that then end up, you know, if you ever go to a coffee shop, the water is so hot you can't drink it for a few minutes, and it's literally simmering in those chemicals. So all of that, again, it's a cumulative thing, Once in a while, it's probably not a big deal unless you're a really sensitive person. But there again, the reason it's so hard to study the health outcomes of this stuff is because we differ in our ability to detoxify these things. And some people can literally walk through napalm and say, this doesn't smell so bad. I don't know what your problem is. And other people get a whiff of Chanel No. 5 and they end up in the ER. So we have to appreciate our individualities. But the main point here is we can all, through fairly simple measures, lower the toxicity. So let's talk about. I mean, I'll throw out some of the things that I've started doing that I think have been helpful for me, usable, like without too much friction. Number one, I have it's called Purist. It's a travel coffee cup, stainless steel. There's no plastic. I really like it. I keep it in my car. If I ever go to a coffee shop, I pull it out and I ask them, please put the coffee in here, um, rather than having them put it in one of the plastic slash paper cups. I either don't ride anymore with plastic bike water bottles, or I use one of the Bevos or similar alternatives to plastic. None of them are perfect, but they certainly work better than the just ingesting after a long ride when a water bottle's been sitting in the sun when it's hot and tasting the flavor of it. I mean, it's unbelievable how obvious it is that there's so many impurities floating around in there. So, so that's a hack on the bike. Um, Generally, if I'm going to hang out in a coffee shop and I go, I'll ask them to put it in a mug, ceramic mug. Um, and at home we have pretty much tried to rid our home of plastic in general, and so we drink out of glass and ceramics. But I'm sure there's many other cool ways of making these micro adjustments in your lifestyle. So what have you found to be helpful?
I think for people, it can feel a little overwhelming, especially if they open up their cabinetry and it's all Ziploc bags
Mm-hmm.
and, various plastic containers, and they're used to going to the local coffee shop and getting a throwaway cup. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's an, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
everywhere is
Yeah.
a toxin.
Yeah.
And to ask yourself, like, what are you using the most? And what are you heating up as the two things to switch first? And
Mm-hmm.
so this gets to a broader conversation around what are you cooking your food in? What are you then housing that food in? What are you using to eat it? And what they're starting to find is like the worst contributors are typically the very things that you only use once, but that one time is like also a problem. So black plastic is what I'm told is like one of the absolute worst,
Mm-hmm.
because it was essentially like a recycled plastic object put into like a fork or something like that. And then the inner part of cans and throwaway mugs are like the other really big contributors. So if you reflect that back on what do you use the most, well, hopefully it's some form of silverware, and it's a coffee mug that you're using consistently, and it's a water bottle that you're using consistently. So if you can invest in those three things, now you probably already have silverware that's good. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a matter of carrying it with you. And if
Mm-hmm.
you feel so compelled to have a travel set, bamboo or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, that's taking it up a notch.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to those hot drinks, making sure you have something stainless steel or glass. Most
Mm-hmm.
people prefer the stainless steel, and
Mm-hmm.
it's insulated and won't burn your hand. But for some of us, we still like to have like glass even for that. And for our water bottles, just assuring you have something that isn't just, I mean, one of my techniques with my clients is to assure they know exactly how many ounces of water their water bottle fills. So not only are they choosing something that avoids toxicity, but helps them actually reach their daily goals by being able to say, I need to drink 5 of these, or I need to drink like 6 of these in a day to feel like I've met my ideal intake for hydration. So I think that it's just an incremental change.
Mm-hmm.
It's an acknowledgement that it does require an investment. For some people, they can go out and do that tomorrow, and for others, they need to think ahead. But if you are heating up food, I really invite you to take it out of the plastic, because they're showing that the plastic actually comes into the food. It is not safe to continue to eat food or drink drinks out of things that are lined in plastic,
Mm-hmm.
because you're just taking on little micro pieces of plastic. And we've at this point accumulated like a full credit card size of plastic. And I'm starting to hear statistics that are even higher than that. And as a mother of a nearly 5-year-old, I have to mention the kids, because it's a tricky thing with a really small infant. You can't have a heavy cup or a hard cup. So there's often plastic associated with kids' plates, cups, and silverware. And so the question ends up being like, how can we minimize that? And so with my daughter, we did our best to find like silicone options and things like that that weren't perfect, but we transitioned her at the second we thought she was ready, and now she's fully in glass or um, stainless steel herself.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if you're giving gifts to parents with kids, consider what you're giving them. If you're giving them a whole bunch of plastic, you're basically contributing to a long term exposure for that child, and then ultimately plastic inside of like a landfill. Whereas these metals and glass options are either recyclable or last so much longer that not only are you preserving their health, but you're protecting the environment at the same time. So it's a win win.
My daughters are in their 20s now. And so this goes way back when we were driving them to grade school, and we didn't have a lot of these alternatives. I mean, we had Nalgene bottles, but I always wanted glass. And back then it was really hard to find. And so Voss which is I think it's from Norway. It's a mineral water from Norway. It still comes in these really nice, beautiful glass bottles. And so I would buy them and collect them and then put the Eldorado water in there and then put them in the kids' backpacks. And the first day, when they pulled out their backpack, the bottle shot out onto the driveway of the, kiss and catch lane and shattered all over the freaking sidewalk. And all the teachers glared at me. And it was like, oh my God, I'm the worst parent. I'm just trying to do a good thing. And now there's glass shards everywhere. Now, thankfully, there's so many alternatives. And many of the glass bottles come encased in silicone, right? And so it's just much easier to do. You don't have to be a knucklehead dad like me.
I think you were just proactively trying to protect your family. And I still love my ball jars.
Yeah.
I think that I don't want people to overthink this. And if money's an issue, like you were describing, like so many bottled water options or like mineral water options come in a glass bottle.
Yeah.
So if you need something to reuse, that's a really inexpensive way to have something right away.
So you touched on another kind of hot topic, which is volume. Like how much should I be drinking? How many ounces and all that? Should we tackle that next real
Let's
quick?
do it.
Yeah. I always laugh at that because I'm like, imagine a day in the winter where you're working on your laptop most of the day, and you're trying to figure out how many ounces to drink compared to a day in July when you climb Long's Peak. So to say that we want X number of ounces per day when we have such a vast delta in the actual need, to me really comes down to a very, very simple metric, which is what's the color of my urine. My urine looks like Mountain Dew. I'm not well hydrated. Even if I drank 90 ounces on that Long's Peak day, that may be vastly inadequate. If you're taking a lot of B vitamins, you have to account for that a little bit. But otherwise, that's a really good measure. How do you do it?
Well, just to clarify, B vitamins have a tendency to turn your urine yellow. So I think that's
what I
what
mean.
you were
Yeah.
just trying to speak to
Yeah.
for anybody who's not aware.
True.
But I similarly am always trying to educate my clients on self-awareness and self-reflection and ultimately making choices that work for them. But so many people come in so significantly dehydrated with no sense of what their body needs that just offering them even like a general barometer of where to start can be useful. But I'm very aware that some people are sedentary and some people are super athletes. We have people in high desert versus ocean conditions. So I typically start with, what are you drinking now?
Mm-hmm.
And we go for a few days to actually evaluate, because most people have no idea how much they even are drinking and they don't have an awareness around it. So step one for me is bringing awareness to it. How much are you drinking? Are you even drinking anything at all? Because so many people in America in particular are drinking soda, coffee, tea, and they're rarely picking up a glass of just water.
Yeah.
So we start there. Maybe they're drinking a single glass of water. I have them reflect on their pee. I have them reflect on their headaches. I have them reflect on how they're feeling. It's almost always some element of not good, fatigue, like you were saying, dizziness, headaches, these just sort of lack of high quality experiences that, again, water's an easy win. So let's try for 2 glasses and then 3 glasses and 4 and 5. And the beauty there is that just by bringing somebody's awareness to what they are doing, they tend to actually improve their behavior. So that same person that might be driven to mostly drink Coke and tea and things like that will actually start moving towards water naturally without even being given a number. But in the process, we sort of find they're perfect. And then that we're usually increasing their exercise at the same time. So I'm bringing awareness to the very fact that that exercise requires hydration, and that, talking to them about going into a workout hydrated, if possible, hydrating during a workout. And if it's a really big workout, assuring that they're kind of flushing out any sort of buildup from the workout itself. And so it's a conversation. I'm not a simple coach that's prescriptive. I'm somebody that's intentionally trying to teach someone how to care for their own bodies. So first is reflecting on what you're doing. Next is bringing awareness to how that makes you feel. And then from there, we improve that And
Mm.
hopefully over the course of their time with me, they've learned their body's red flags, their body's general needs, and they've learned how to alter sort of their typical day's activities based on the extraordinary activities of the
Yeah.
day.
I love the intuitive connection, insight, listening to what's your body saying, and, really cultivating that somatic, oh, this is this is a clear message that I'm getting, a clear signal that I'm getting as I get closer and closer in contact with this 60 trillion cells of mortal tissue that we are endowed with, right? So, what about people who struggle with those signals? People who say, you know what? I had a patient recently say, I know I need to drink more. In fact, I take pains to put the water in the appropriate container. And when I'm swimming and doing laps in the pool, I put it on the edge of the pool. And still, at the end of my swim, I haven't taken a drink, and I keep forgetting.
So twofold. I'm a big goal setter. That doesn't work for everyone. It doesn't work for every single one of my clients, but it's at least a place I'll start. So
Mm-hmm.
in that situation, like I think we've even discussed this particular individual and that they're an athlete that needs to be hydrating more in the water while they're swimming. And so the fact that they're not doing it is impacting their performance, and that's a problem. So they have a real need. And like you said, they're just not doing it. So this is an opportunity to change behavior. And so I like to set goals around that behavior. Goals can be performance, or they can be like, actually the journey towards the performance. So in this situation, it's she needs to drink X amount of ounces or at least something
Mm-hmm.
during her workout. In that situation, like I like to set a specific goal. Like let's say she's going to drink 3 times during the course of an hour-long training session. Well, then the question is, how do you get her to do it? It's always trial and error. And for me, I really like to set notifications. I mean, that's a simple one. If these days everyone's so tech heavy that they almost always have a watch or a phone nearby, it's as simple as setting a reminder. Because then you have to actually confront the fact that you have a reminder and you're not
Mm-hmm.
doing it.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, it's mindset.
Mm-hmm.
It's really getting down to like what's holding you back. And that's a more complicated answer because for each individual, that's going to be something different. It can be anything from I'm not worthy to some conditioning from age 12 where somebody made you feel bad for an activity.
Mm-hmm.
But in most cases, it's just like lethargy or just some form of like overcoming this um, old behavioral cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. The resistance is coming from somewhere. You've already acknowledged that it would be beneficial for you to do this thing, drinking more water. And yet there's still some internal resistance to that. And with a very, very radically non judgmental stance, completely open to whatever arises, just setting the inquiry like, let's just be curious about what that might be,
Yeah.
and allow those things to kind of bubble up in our field of awareness.
Curiosity is usually enough
Mm-hmm.
to get over a hurdle for most people because they start to see how ridiculous it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh my God, I'm an athlete. I'm supposed
Yeah.
to drink water. I put the water there. Why am I not
Mm-hmm.
drinking it? Oh my God, I've got this notification. It's telling me to do it. And I'm still not doing it. This is just silly. I'm going to do
Totally.
it. But there's so many other ways to overcome hesitation. Like you can get a buddy or you can have some sort of accountability
Yeah.
support system, whether it's that notification or an athlete's coach, and you can do it as a team.
Yeah.
And once you do it, it ceases to usually stay a problem.
Totally. I don't know what your favorite one is, but I use one called the mindfulness bell. And the mindfulness bell reminds me, we'll get into the fifth pillar. Um, it's just an app that I download on my phone that you can select the tone of the chime once an hour. And it reminds me to take 3 deep box breaths, pillar number 5, and drink water every hour because I'm one of those people that will rush through the day and also forget to drink. So,
That's a lovely one. For me, I've noticed living at altitude, like my well being is so impacted by my choices the first 2 hours of the day. I don't have as much of a problem throughout the day. So I've noticed if I have a workout that has me drinking a ton of water early in the day, I feel so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that among my female clients too. I work with a lot of women over 40, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'd love actually if you had a moment to speak to this, but is there any specific biological reason that a woman over 40 would have a harder time staying hydrated?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know?
So a fetus is about 90% water. A child is about 80% water. A young adult, about 70%. And by the time we're in our 80s and 90s, 40%. So we keep shriveling up, we keep drying out over our life cycle. And water, fundamentally, aqua vitae, water is life. It's where we came from, and it's the most essential nutrient of all. So, um, acknowledging the fact that we have this tendency to dry out over time, and much of that is mediated hormonally. So, you know, my pet name for estrogen is the plump and juicy hormone. It literally keeps your skin and all of your connective tissues um, robust. And part of the reason it does that is it allows those cells to retain more water and even the interstitium between the cells. And there are many other hormones that have similar effects. So during perimenopause and menopause, that's like one of the main ways that women and men too tend to feel a little bit more dry. The skin gets a little bit more crepey, vaginal dryness, the whole thing. So it just becomes more and more important to really stay on top of this thing, particularly when during our youth, we've already not had great thirst signals, right? So we have to somehow really work on mindfully overcoming those. Um, yeah, I mean,
That was
oh,
a
yeah.
fabulous answer. I was curious, and I mean, generally across my practice, when people cross into 40 and above, I've tried to explain to them that what they did in the past, they were probably getting away with bad behavior.
Mm-hmm,
And now they need to really take the time, often the perimenopause or menopause to correct their behavior and allow them to sort of protect their health
mm-hmm,
into like later stages of life. And I just hadn't correlated the exact science on the hydration piece. So thank you for that.
mm-hmm,
Um, you asked me more specifically, like, how do I remind myself? With water in particular, living at high altitude, like I've trained myself to drink constantly, but I also have some very subtle tricks. Like I have a neon pink water bottle.
mm-hmm.
It's hard to miss it. So it's reminding me all day long to drink it. And I even find with clients, like I mentioned earlier, I want them to celebrate this vessel that they carry around this life force in. So I encourage them to go get a new water bottle, put some stickers that they like on it. For some people, like put a strap on it so they're carrying it around so that it just becomes like
Can't ignore
they can't ignore
it.
it, they don't forget it, and it
Mm-hmm.
just becomes a piece of their toolbox.
Totally. Well, let's dig into another concept around water that's so freaking interesting, which has to do with the alkalinity or the acidity of it. And again, so many ways we can unpack this, but one thing that I really want to share with everyone is that another thing to do, and I generally do this separately from my first glass, which has all the salt. I'll do another glass that has a weak acid. And a weak acid is either apple cider vinegar or lemon juice. And what's absolutely fascinating, and there's tons of data on this. There's several studies, a series of studies done at the University of Paris that measures all kinds of things like gastric juice secretion, insulin levels, and postprandial glucose levels. So, what is my blood sugar after eating, in this case, a croissant? And so they gave people croissants either with just plain water or coffee or water with a teaspoon of fresh squeezed lemon juice. And what they found was water and coffee had the same glucose response to that croissant, whereas those who had lemon water had a 35% reduction in their glucose levels. That's like
It's astounding.
unbelievable. That's astounding. And similar studies were replicated with apple cider vinegar. So you can kind of choose your weapon. I prefer fresh squeezed lemon juice.
Hugely common practice among yogis. I was
Yeah,
in the yoga world for 20 years, and that was just almost an assumed practice.
yeah, exactly. I think it's even more important before actually having whatever it is, whether it's a croissant or something that has carbs in it. But I find that I actually enjoy coffee. I'm drinking much less of it these days, but I still enjoy it. And coffee alone, black coffee with no cream or sugar, significantly spikes my glucose, mainly because of the cortisol effect. It's a stimulant. And using the lemon water trick will blunt that response of um, elevated glucose after drinking black coffee.
I have so many questions because I've found over the years, especially as I've entered perimenopause, that I have to be incredibly careful with caffeine.
Mm-hmm.
So I've even moved my coffee, which is decaf, to after my first meal instead
Mm-hmm.
of before because it was just having such a shock to my system and
Mm-hmm.
spiking my cortisol so badly.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that that's worked really well with my clients too, to even have them start drinking a coffee like midway through their meal instead of before.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious, like you said, it blunts it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
does it sort of just create a net like neutral if you've got this one thing that's positive and this other that kind of has a negative impact? Or do you like, would you recommend people
Yeah,
just do the
for sure.
lemon water?
Yeah, I mean, there's many ways to think about coffee. There's plenty of studies that suggest it's a net positive for your life. I've found that like after 40, even a couple of, I used to be like 6, 8 cup a day kind of a guy, freaking coffee fiend through med school and residency and so forth. Really, really love the ritual element of it and all of the things. But eventually I'm like, there's no way I can sleep soundly throughout the day. Yes, it impacts hydration negatively at those levels of coffee intake. And most devastatingly, it just jacked up my sleep. So I'm way, way less. I do like one caffeinated cup and then one half calf, and I'm good for the day. I love matcha. I think that's a much, um, you know, the goal that we all want, the way that we all want to feel is calm focus. Jittery focus is no good, right? Calm, gorked out in La La Land is no good. So calm focus is the optimum state, and that comports with our parasympathetic, parasympathetic vagal, autonomic kind of state. And I think there are milder, more gentle stimulants like matcha rather than coffee that work a little bit better. But um, if you drink too much coffee, it has lots of downstream consequences that are related to dehydration. As we know, it's a diuretic, similar to alcohol. And so if we're really trying to optimize hydration, we have to keep all of these things in mind. But yes, the kind of one for one, I'm taking a caffeinated beverage, which I know will spike my glucose a little bit, and I'm buffering against that by using a weak acid like lemon water. Oftentimes, is a helpful thing to do.
Do you recommend people do it for other meals later in the day?
Totally,
So
especially carby meals.
it's interesting because that used to be such a common practice to have a lemon in water when you'd go
Yeah,
to a restaurant, and you
yeah,
don't see that as frequently, I'm sure,
yeah,
because of the cost, but it
yeah.
sounds like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and I mean, you can still order a slice of lemon, but that's very different than squeezing a teaspoon of lemon juice into the water. And you're probably not going to get that effect with just a sliced lemon floating around.
So more like half a lemon, really, or even a
Um,
full lemon.
a teaspoon is maybe, depending on the size, like typical, like a quarter of a lemon.
Okay.
Yeah.
So You heard it here, guys. Be
Yeah.
sure to ask for a couple of slices of lemon
Especially
if
when
you're
you are having
eating
your
it.
croissants in the morning, which that's a whole nother topic of like, when do I break my fast that we can get into another time. But on the topic of water, the last thing that I really wanted to talk about is how to use water as a friend is really what we're interested in on this show. And so probably the most powerful way that water can be our ally is not just by drinking it, but by using it in different temperatures. And so using cold water in the form of a cold shower, an ice bath, an ice plunge, and then using hot water in the form of steam or sauna therapies, and oscillating between those two has untold hormetic benefits. As we know, hormesis, good stress, eustress, noble stress, these are the positive ways that we can stress our bodies to actually become anti-fragile. And using cold as an ally, much to the chagrin or to the contrast of how I was raised, which was bundle up so you don't catch a cold. And that maxim led to me getting sick 8 to 10 times a year every year. I had the worst immune system. When I befriended the cold, rather than bundling up against it, I embraced it, and I started using it as an ally. That I really received the cold, even though I still don't love it. My relationship with it is much more nuanced now. Like, I see the value so clearly, and one of those benefits is I stopped getting sick completely. So, as a doctor, we can talk about, you can do immunizations and vaccinations against a specific pathogen, and that's awesome. And there's a time and a place for that for sure. But I'm talking about raising and supercharging your immunity against all pathogens in one stroke. And there's been quite a bit of data on how this all works, looking at the various cytokines, looking at the various cold shock and heat shock proteins that really, really allow us to fortify our immunity so that we're far more resilient against viruses and bacterial pathogens, whether that's the common cold or influenza or COVID, all of these things, has been one of the most life transforming interventions for me. That has totally changed the game for me. And, we recommend re um, basically creating a different relationship to the cold, because most of us are like, I can't even stand the thought of that. But now, as we move into spring and summer, although it's snowing today, um, we can capture the time of year where it's less off-putting. So this is a perfect time to begin cultivating a cold practice as opposed to doing it in December. Um, what's your relationship with the cold?
Well, I just want to shine light on what you were saying. I mean, I think season change is a really great time to create behavioral change, even if it isn't directly in sync with the behavior and the change. Just
Mhm.
because whenever days are getting longer or shorter, we're already adjusting our schedule. We're already having to kind of reorient ourselves. And anytime we're reorienting ourselves, I find it's a really good time to like inject new behaviors or remove things that don't work.
Yeah.
My relationship with cold and hot therapy has been different at different chapters in my life. I used a lot of cold therapy when I was training heavily for triathlons, mostly for inflammation management. Like I'd go sit in the Boulder Creek
Mhm.
and get my knees to feel better after a 6-hour bike ride. I also have used heat therapy like really effectively, especially I prefer moisture, probably because we're in the high desert.
Yeah.
When I was dealing again with that autoimmune condition, I needed something nourishing. I needed to feel like my nervous system needed a sense of safety.
Mhm.
So being in a moist humid environment was really nourishing for me and was a big part of my healing. And then, I had a bit of a hormone collapse as I entered perimenopause and was postpartum. And I had to do gentle, habits in each major category that we're
Mm-hmm.
describing. And so for me, the cold therapy one was just splashing cold water on my face.
Mm-hmm.
But I would get the sort of shock response from
Mm-hmm.
something so subtle. And it was a part of my healing
Mm-hmm.
journey. And then there came a point where I all of a sudden could switch that to a cold shower.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remind people that it doesn't have to be like a black, white, on off switch when it comes to habit change. Often it's figuring out where you are,
Yep.
having a real good sense of your actual response to a stimuli and finding the right level of it for you now, but reevaluating that.
Yes.
So, I've seen some interesting science out there now that talks about, especially for women over 40, we may see more benefits from heat over cold. And if
Mm-hmm.
we are doing cold, it doesn't need to be as cold.
Yep. Or as
That
long.
or as long.
Mm-hmm.
That really resonates with my personal experience, what I could tolerate in my 20s and what felt like nourishing to my system and like increased my overall vitality now feels like it shocks my system in a way that feels not so great. Like
Yeah.
it feels like it creates a retraction and a sense of getting beat up a little bit
Yep.
by the experience. That said, that was where I was at. And as I'm starting to do these habits again and build them, I have to ask myself, will I be able to do that in the future?
Yep.
And so I think that some of the science is very new. I think that we don't have the full picture. I think that women in particular have not been studied sufficiently. And I also think that super athletes are not fully on the radar of science. So I asked myself if I can get myself back to the conditioning where I'm training at the level I was when I was in my 20s, to have maybe the amount of muscle on my body and, reduced fat that I had when I was younger. If I choose to do that, maybe I'll then respond to these colder temperatures and longer stints of cold therapy in the way I used to. I don't know, and I don't think there have been studies on that. So it's a long-winded answer of saying I always think it's individualized,
Yeah.
and I think this is a worthy area to pursue.
Totally. I love the reminder to really, again, we've talked about this earlier in the show, knowing where you are, embracing, connecting with the intelligence, the immense intelligence within us. Um, I think that whenever we look at hormetic polarities, and we'll explore a number of them throughout this podcast series, cold versus heat is a hormetic polarity, but all of them have too much of a good thing, right? So there's nothing worse for your biceps muscle than to lay flaccid all the time. It wants to push and pull against a weight. But there is such a thing as a weight that's so big that it will tear the muscle off the bone. And so knowing where those limits lie so that we can use these positive hormetic stressors in a way that actually builds resilience rather than has the opposite effect, um, is really important, and I think it's absolutely individualized and personalized. So thank you for bringing that up. It's so important, that inner wisdom of knowing where our limits are.
It's interesting as we've been talking, I'm reminded of so many, I don't want to say ancient practices because they were being done not that long ago in human history, but
Mm-hmm.
bathhouses,
Yeah.
places where people went and spent time in water in different temperatures among community at times, in how that was not only a time to separate yourself from the stress of life and to just take time to be connected with yourself, but to go in and out of various environments and often in natural pools. So
Mm-hmm.
people were being exposed to these minerals and these temperature changes, and it was often prescribed if someone was dealing with any form of dis-ease. So in a way, we're just inviting people to like come back to some of the older wisdom, but we're having to do it in a way that's a little bit more formulaic because we're in a modern society that's moving really, really fast. And we're having to sort of remind ourselves of our innate wisdom because we have so many distractions that take us away from it. So I just wanted to like shine light on the fact that this isn't like new. It's actually quite old,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a returning to that wisdom.
Yeah. All the hormetic polarities have been implemented into ancient wisdom traditions over probably tens of thousands of years, not just thousands of years. So if we were to summarize this for our listeners into pragmatic, practical, usable information, first we had living water. Where do you get it? Where if you live on the Front Range, Colorado Springs, delivered in glass, that we can then further enhance with more electrolytes using salt powders and or adding more of the trace minerals in the form of fulvic acid, using enough of the water to clarify our urine, to keep our urine relatively clear, depending on how active we are, how much we're sweating, and so forth. And then using the benefit of a weak acid like lemon juice or apple cider vinegar to optimize our glycemic regulation. And then, following all of that up with a morning routine that at least one might consider includes some sort of a cold practice. For me, I never take a shower without ending on cold. I still use hot water to begin with the shampoo and all of that. And I always, always end with a cold blast. Very, very rarely does my body tell me not today. That's probably once a year or somewhere around that. Almost always I don't really feel like doing this, but I deeply know it's good for me. I deeply know it's good for me. So finding your way through listening to your own wisdom to figure out if some of these things apply to you, maybe all of them, maybe some of them, maybe at this time of life, maybe at that time of life. But these are all things that I've found to be beneficial for the majority of people. Maybe not everyone at every phase of life, but if we're interested in this project that you and I are, involved in, which is how do we lift the salutogenesis? How do we help people find their own innate capacities to heal and to do it in very simple, manageable ways that don't cost a lot of money, take a lot of time, and require a lot of sophistication? Here is hopefully our listeners have found some useful information in this conversation about some of the ways that we can use water as a deeper ally.
Yeah, and just jumping in and reminding people that you don't have to make all the changes all at once.
Yeah.
So typically when I'm working with someone and I present a whole bunch of options, we discuss both ways people can walk towards health and ways they can maybe step back from things that are holding them back, like looking at what types of water bottles they're using. One of these is going to jump out as a place to start. And I'd invite you to start it right away.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah. I like that. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Really enjoyed this conversation with you. And I look forward to the next one. I think we'll just go in order. Second pillar of health being nutrition, and much to debunk, demystify, and unpack with that one. And yeah, wonderful. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.